Yeah, speaking of fixing Bitcoin, maybe we can kick things off and uh, yeah, maybe
That
I
sounds
can
good
give
to
a
me.
little bit of overview. So, do you want to give intro of what we do on these calls, Stephen, and then maybe I'll talk a little bit about Lightning Hack Day in Istanbul.
Yeah, it sounds good. So, welcome everybody to the Bitcoin design community call. See a lot of familiar faces here in the room, but for anyone who's just coming in for the first time, we're a community of designers that are working to try and improve the user experience of Bitcoin. And we do this community call usually once a month, and this is just kind of a place for us to be able to talk about, events that are going on, projects, initiatives that people are working on in the community, and whatever else just people decide that they feel they want to talk about. I got a couple different topics want to cover today. One topic I want to get to is just the topic of Bitcoin companies getting more involved in open source, specifically involved in open design. Another topic that I think would be ripe for discussion is this unified QR code project that we've been talking about a lot lately. And then the one that we're going to start off with here is Lightning Hack Day, which was in Istanbul, put on by FOMO. And Pavlineks went there, and Johns went there. Several other members of the design community were there. So if anybody, joins in and wants to share their experiences at Istanbul, please just request access. I'll add you to the stage. But Pavlinex is here, so I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to you, and you can tell everybody, what this event is and what your experience was like.
Yeah, sure. So this is Lightning Hack Day event happening in Turkey, in Istanbul. It was a pretty interestingly organized event since it was like in a workshop type of format. It was mostly technical people that were attending the event since it was like a hack day when supposedly people were working on different types of projects. So, but the format itself was pretty lightweight. There wasn't like a strict structure, or there wasn't like talks. There weren't schedules. It was mostly just Bitcoiners in a single building with many offices and tables. So different projects gathered around these tables. And we simply had a discussion around so many interesting things. Like, imagine being 4 days locked with over 100 Bitcoiners, everybody trying to solve difficult problems, everybody building. There was so much energy, and I met so many interesting people. But I will try to keep my ideas and discussion around design. First of all, yeah, Jones was also there. Ed was there as well. We had Albi team attending. So one takeaway is that people are aware of Bitcoin design. I got involved. People were inviting me basically to join these different discussions whenever design issue came up. So Johnson and I were discussing this with different projects. We were talking to Ben Ark as well around how we can help him with Alan Bits UI. And Johnson, maybe I needed to invite him as well. Yeah, Steven, feel free to interrupt me if I'm rambling. I will just try to, give a little bit of intro and how it
You're doing great.
Okay, so yeah, we mostly try to solve these interesting problems. We had a few light design sprints. Mostly we tried to, explain people some things. And what I personally did was I asked a lot of UX questions, and mostly to these very technical people. So I would just approach them and ask them how they feel about, unified QR code, which is a discussion that we'll have a little bit later on, and got different types of answers. I mean, you would imagine that people would say, okay, it's great to have a single QR code and there is no distinction between the layers. But then again, I had few developers that were very pro layering and distinction, that Bitcoin and Lightning should be different, that users should know the difference and things like that. Yeah, besides that, very great energy. I felt so energized. I would really recommend that people try to join in these live events that Bitcoiners organize around the world. Because, yeah, speaking to people in real life really made a difference. And people aren't as angry as they are usually on Twitter. They don't yell. Even some of the toxic people on Twitter were very approachable, and the whole event was very warm, and we were all like really discussing, and you could approach literally anyone and just kickstart the conversation. But I also see Jones is in here, so maybe he wants to give his idea, and also see that Michael is also. I think he was also attending the event, so maybe we can also invite them to speak and provide their experience. But yeah, if anybody has any questions, meanwhile, feel free to ask while I try to invite other people as well.
Yeah, I've invited both of them to the stage. They might be in a position where they're not able to speak, but we'll see if they'd like to join in. I guess in the meantime, I was curious so I think it was like called the Lightning Hack Day or something. Was it set up like a traditional hackathon where you have prizes and specific objectives people are trying to reach, or was it just more of a hack day and that people are you know trying to do these kind of quick design and development sprints?
So quite honestly, it was about people, not the project, not the code, not people specifically building projects. Though there were people, of course, building. But personally, I just tried to talk to people and ask questions. And it wasn't like very heavily scheduled either. Like we also did a talk for BTC Base Server, and basically we figured out what we want to talk about 10 minutes before we were scheduled to do a workshop. So it was very unofficial, very approachable, and I personally love that kind of structure where people simply get involved, build. You had hackers at tables, building vending machines, building Bitcoin ATMs. A beer tap was also very interesting. Basically, you just a beer tap will generate an LN URL. You just scan, pay, and you get beer, and it was 420 sats. So it was pretty cheap beer, and yeah, it was very awesome.
That sounds awesome. That sounds great. I think somebody from the Bolt Fun account I added as a speaker because they requested access, but there was a spinning wheel, and now they are back in the audience. So I'm not sure if something messed up there or not. But yeah, that was really cool. So were there any projects that was there any thing that came out of it, like kind of any new projects that started? Because I think Albi actually started at the online FOMO hack sprint in 2021. So were there any cool brand new projects that people just started from scratch at this thing, or any ongoing collaborations you see happening out of this?
So yeah, when they were doing demos of the projects, I was doing an interview in the podcasting room, so I really didn't hear about any new projects that kick things out off. As I say, I'm usually at these events because of the people and discussions I can have with them rather than trying to listen to presentations, talks, or technical demos. Um, because yeah, you can always rewatch that online, read it, but yeah, that human connection and connecting, networking isn't something that you can get when you get home. So usually at conferences, that's what I do. So I'm perhaps not the best person to ask these questions. Maybe some of the guys that attended here, I also see team from Albi and Jones, and maybe they, if they can, yeah, of course, speak. Maybe they can talk about it. But yeah, mostly also Ed Barefoot 88, I think it's his name on Twitter. He did a presentation about a Lightning development kit, which is basically our wallet UI kit. He just added a little bit of Lightning to it, and he did a presentation, Shield Bitcoin design as well. And as I said, plenty of people were already quite aware of the work we do, and we had some very interesting discussions with developers and a few designers actually that were there as well.
And that's actually maybe. Oh, sorry. Were you going to say something, Shaw?
Yeah, no, it was just a question for Pavel. It was I saw on your Twitter that you were on a podcast. I think you mentioned it there as well. Was that part of the conference, or was that and it was with the dude that created mempool? So was it any sort of info on what you discussed in the podcast, and is it coming out soon?
So there was a podcasting room, very well equipped with microphones and things like that. So different crews were basically scheduling and coming in and out, inviting guests. So I was involved with Vlad Kostea, the Bitcoin Takeover podcast, and I also did one for the Bitcoin.news. So I think these Vlad's podcast should be out, I think, in a week or so. And yeah, the discussions was mostly about the work I do, which is BTC Pay server, Bitcoin design, and things like that, Bitcoin Smiles. But yeah, overall, it was very well organized in terms of that. There are so many different things that you can do there. There was also like a main speaking stage, and on day one, people did like 3 keynotes. But besides that, it was very much focused on people and networking, and basically just Bitcoiners at the end of the day also getting drunk and having drunk Bitcoin discussion. Like we went to bars, and you would have like 60 of us entering a bar, and all you can hear is Bitcoin, Bitcoin, Bitcoin. And we even managed tried at least to orange peel the bartenders, and yeah, that usually does not end well when you have 20 people yelling at them because they bought I don't know, some altcoin like Dogecoin, or I cannot remember what it was. So it was also interesting to see how we as Bitcoiners fail at these things when we try to talk about Bitcoin to people. We get so passionate about certain topics that we, lose, I guess, the idea that the person we are talking to isn't technical and do not understand things we are talking about.
Hey, I was about to say that Johns just made it onto the stage, and now it looks like he's back down in the audience. So I'm assuming he must be having connection issues again. But the Bolt Found account is online. So would you like to speak about your experience at the hackathon? Okay, I'm thinking that that Bolt Fun account might be having some connection issues as well, because I can't hear anything from them.
Yeah, same here, but I'm wearing my
Okay.
Bolt Fun t-shirt, so maybe this will make them happy.
Well, before we move on to the next topic, since everyone from that party is kind of having connection issues, I'll just go ahead and give a quick show for what they're working on, try to do the project justice as best I can. So Johns and some of his friends put together a project called Bolt Fun, which is kind of like a technical builder's guide to Lightning and all the different technologies you can use to build Lightning applications. And they have got their own hackathon coming up, which I believe is later in March. You can check it out on the bolt.fun website. It's called Shock the Web, and I believe they kind of want the focus to be on getting Lightning applications to integrate, with the web, with websites and e-commerce and stuff like that. So it is like a kind of like a week-long remote hackathon, and I think they're really encouraging that every team has not only developers but also at least one designer on the team. So I think that's a pretty good event, and I encourage you to go to bolt.fun and look at the hackathon page to see what they're up to, see if you could put together a team and enter a project in there. Something cool could come out of that. I think I want to go ahead and move on to our next topic now, just to get things, to keep things moving. So we've been having this discussion kind of about unified QR codes. And, I'm not sure where the idea originated from. I think I first heard Pav, you and John's talking about it, and then I saw Steve Lee promoting it. So I was curious if you or anybody else who's on the stage would like to give kind of an explanation of the how and the why of this idea, and then I'll talk a little bit later about my kind of microsite project.
Yeah, sure. I'm not sure if Steve is able to join us and explain, because he does have a good way of breaking this down. So, Steve, if you can join, just request to talk and we can add you.
He's invited.
Okay, yeah. So, basically, I also had like discussions about unified QR code for both on-chain and Lightning. Oh, we have Steve. So
hey, I'm happy to speak to it.
Hey, Steve. Awesome. Let's go.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I think maybe we can start with the observation that the vast majority of payment experiences right now for Bitcoin users is to be presented with multiple QR codes, often displayed as in like a tab format where one tab might be labeled Bitcoin or on-chain, and the other one is labeled Lightning. And there's other payment protocols too, like LNURL. So sometimes I've been presented with three different QR codes, and as someone in the space, I generally understand these differences, but the vast majority of users don't understand that distinction. I've observed many users don't even notice the tab format. So, like for example, the Moon wallet, it defaults to the on-chain QR code for receiving. I would suspect a lot of users don't even see that they can switch to Lightning, and then they just receive over on chain. So that's sort of the inspiration for like how can we improve to just make this simpler for users. And with the unified QR code, the user is just presented with one QR code. Ideally, they scan it, and hopefully the software just does the right thing. You can think about what does the right thing mean. If it's pretty simple to know what to do if one of the at least one of the two wallets of the sender and the receiver only supports on-chain today, then it has to be on-chain. Like if the receiving wallet basically if the receiving wallet doesn't support Lightning, or the sending wallet does not support Lightning, then it has to be on-chain. So the only interesting scenario to discuss would be if both wallets support Lightning. Then ideally, it's the payments done over Lightning in the vast majority of the time, because you get the benefits of speed, instant payment, lower fees, etc. So one path forward for a unified QR code would be to leverage the existing BIP21 format, in which the URI provides an on-chain address, but then has optional data in which you can put a Lightning invoice in that optional data, such as a Bolt 11 invoice. There's been some early testing by a few folks that I know, including Stephen, that actually suggests pretty positive results in terms of existing support for that format, both from popular on-chain like exchanges that only support on-chain today, as well as popular Lightning wallets and mobile Lightning wallets. So I think one thing I'm hoping to see from crowdsourcing and volunteers working on this is just collect more data as to what's the current state of different wallets supporting this, and to also get a better sense for QR code density and impact on users. I actually just tweeted about that 20 minutes or so ago, because a QR code which has both an on-chain address and a Lightning invoice will necessarily get more dense and would impact older cameras, older phones, and it's just unclear to me without seeing data what that impact would be in terms of percentage of people, and whether it just makes it slightly more annoying to scan or simply can't scan it at all. There's different degrees of quality difference. So if we could collect more data on that too, I think that would inform many wallets on their decision of what to present users when receiving Bitcoin.
Yeah, thanks for that. Thanks so much for that, Steve. So that sounds like a good segue into kind of the how we're thinking about actually building this. So we've got a channel in our Slack right now on the Bitcoin Design Community Slack. If you're not in it, just go to bitcoin.design and look for the big join us on Slack button. And we got a channel in there just called Unified QR Code, where we've been discussing it. I have kind of like a little microsite that I want to build, which would kind of explain the idea a little bit, explain the value proposition of it, and how to implement it. So I've got a Figma document for that. I've also got a very early like Google Drive spreadsheet right now where I've been tracking some of my results, where I'm just trying to see like, does the wallet accept a BIP21 QR code when I scan it? Does the wallet accept Lightning? If so, does it recognize the Lightning invoice? As Steve pointed out, we need to make sure that we're testing this with like a variety of different services. So it wouldn't just be like wallets on your phone, but you also have to think about it like popular exchanges and people withdrawing from those kinds of services. So if anybody is interested in testing this stuff out and contributing to this effort, you can look for that channel on Slack. That's probably the best place to find information right now, and look for that spreadsheet link. And I think another thing to his point is we need to start thinking about the actual scannability issues. If you're using an iPhone, it probably has a very good camera, but older phones don't always have good cameras. That was kind of some issues that several of us were noticing in El Salvador, with just making daily spending Lightning payments all the time last year. You would be a variety of different phones, a variety of different devices, and somebody generates a Bolt 11 invoice and it works for one person, it doesn't work for another person, depending on their phone. Some solutions that I've been bouncing around for that could be animated QR codes, though we need to research that a little bit further and see are there valid security concerns about that format. But certainly Bolt 12 adoption, were that to become widely implemented, QR codes could certainly be significantly smaller. So, but definitely, just if you're interested in this topic at all, I would join that channel on Slack and just follow the discussion there. Does anybody have any questions or comments on this idea?
Yeah, I have a question, or actually, I would like us to explain a little bit more how that would work UX-wise, since this is a design call. So a question for Steven or Steve. Basically, this is a QR code that unifies on-chain and Lightning. And if I, as a user, wanted to pay through that QR code, one of the biggest misconceptions that when I talk to people about this specific format was that they were like, they thought that it will be like compatibility problem, and they weren't aware what will happen when a user with an on-chain tries to pay it, or when a user with a Lightning tries to scan basically that QR code. Can either of you maybe recap like scenarios paying from different layers? How would that look for the end user basically?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. So let's say that I'm paying Pavlinex, and I scan a QR code of his. Let's say he's a merchant, and I'm scanning his QR code to pay. Assuming it's in this format of BIP21, so it would have an on-chain address available and a Bolt 11 Lightning invoice available. And let's also assume that my wallet is a Lightning enabled wallet. So, let me start off with like the design space of what could happen, and then I can offer my opinion, what I'd like to see as a user. But the one option is that my wallet that's sending Pavlinex money would prefer the Lightning option, and so it would just default and use the Lightning invoice and attempt to pay over Lightning. And the happy path there is it happens in a couple seconds at very minimal fee, and everyone's happy that the payment is made. A second design option would be that my wallet could prompt me saying, hey, you have the option to pay on Lightning or on-chain, or whatever the right vocabulary is that we want to use, and the user chooses. But that really is no better than just showing two different QR codes. So I personally don't really even see that as a plausible option. Now, a variation of the first option, though, if Lightning is chosen by default as the path, and if it fails for some reason, let's say that there's no path found, there's not enough liquidity, etc., then the wallet could prompt the user and say, "Hey, we failed to pay. Would you like to fall back and use this other method?" And again, we can separately determine what's the best vocabulary to refer to on chain. But basically, you'd want to communicate to the user, it's going to cost this much more, and there will be a time delay, and then give them the choice of attempting to pay on chain. So I think, I mean, hopefully like 95+% of the time, it just works. I scan Polynexus QR code, tap to confirm, 2 seconds later, the payment's completed, really low fees, everyone's happy. And I don't have to, as a user, I don't have to make any decisions. I don't have to make distinctions between on-chain and layer 2 and Lightning and all this stuff. It just works.
I think that if we're looking out for the user's best interests, we kind of have to assume that, like, if they have a Lightning wallet on their phone in their pocket, then Lightning is probably the best option for them the majority of the time, because I mean, it's going to be faster and the fees are going to be so much lower. I'm not saying every time, but probably most of the time the fees are going to be better. And you could imagine a scenario where, like Steve said, it just defaults to Lightning, because that's probably what's going to be in their best interest. But there could be some logic behind the scenes in the wallet that can make some determination, like, oh, the user's making a payment that's way bigger than the one they usually make, and this one might actually save them a little bit of money going on chain. So it could prompt them with the option being like, hey, would you like to save on fees as long as you're cool waiting an hour for the payment to process? You could bring up a message like that, without even having to say the word on chain. You could just express it in terms of what the user would care about, which is fees and how much time it's going to take. But I would be personally comfortable if it just defaulted to Lightning most of the time. And I also see options for other forms of extensibility, like, for example, with the Chivo wallet in El Salvador. For people who use Chivo every day, that functions as an intra-ledger transfer. So the on-chain address and the Lightning invoices that Chivo merchants can generate is entirely for cross compatibility with, like, the rest of the Bitcoin ecosystem. But for people just making payments, Salvadorans making payments to other Salvadorans, from what I witnessed, a lot of people were using the intra-ledger Chivo QR code, which is a fairly small number. And you could imagine a situation where you could have a BIP21 QR code, which includes an on-chain address, a Bolt 12 offer, and the little Chivo number. And then you basically have a QR code that is compatible with 3 different services. And, the wallet makes the decision about what's the best one for the user in that situation.
That actually brings up a good point that we should all be considering and thinking about. There's many different payment protocols, and there's already on chain. There's Bolt 11, both of which have a lot of are somewhat ubiquitous. There's LNURL, there's AMP, there's Bolt 12, and it probably will just continue to grow. My current thinking is that it seems like wallets, it's very important to distinguish sending and receiving when discussing this topic. And it seems to me like there's really no way of getting around wallets will need to support many payment protocols for sending, because they want to satisfy users, you want to be able to be compatible with as much as possible. But for receiving, I think it could be narrower, and it could be narrower, and to generally just support the most ubiquitous 1 or 2 mechanisms, and only add others if they truly differentiate for your user base as a wallet designer. Because otherwise, I don't even see how it works if on the receiving end, if you support all the protocols, the QR code density is just too great. So my current thinking on this is that the best approach right now would be BIP21 with an on-chain address and Bolt 11 invoice. And then as Lightning enabled wallets become predominant and most wallets support Lightning, then perhaps that might be in 2 or 3 years, then it can flip to be a Lightning centric invoice, such as Bolt 11, which does support a fallback on-chain address, as does Bolt 12.
Yeah, that makes sense. So it's like it's almost more important for your app to be able to scan any QR code than it is for your app to be able to generate any kind of QR code. Um, I just saw that Juan Carlos just joined us on the stage. Did you have any comments on this topic?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for having this discussion. This is really interesting. This is probably my second time joining the spaces on Twitter, and I just want to introduce myself. My name is Juan Carlos Morales, and I was born in El Salvador, lived in the States for 20 years, and I'm back in El Salvador. And I am part of an organization that it's called My First Bitcoin. And what we do is we educate people in the basics of Bitcoin. And I had the opportunity to meet Stephen when he was here for the Bit conference. So thank you for inviting me to this group. And I just wanted to mention that based on the experience that we have teaching the basics of Bitcoin, even though we try to explain the difference between on-chain and Lightning, a lot of people who have never been exposed to digital currencies or digital anything, and this is the first time that they're being exposed to Bitcoin and payments and all that. It's a little difficult for them to understand the difference between one and the other, and it takes a little while. So I was wondering if there could be a feature in which, let's say, I have a wallet that has both on-chain and Lightning capabilities, and the other person might have just one. So is there a way that the camera will pick up what the QR code reference to, whether it's on-chain and Lightning, and then adjust accordingly? That's just sort of my question, and if, I don't know if that's possible, but if on the other hand, if there is anything that I can contribute from our experiences here in El Salvador, teaching the basis of Bitcoin, be happy to be a resource for the team as well. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the BIP21 QR code, if I understood your question correctly, was about, if there was, something where you could have, one QR and just let the wallet decide, kind of make a good decision. That's definitely with this unified QR code project, that would help that out. So yeah, if you're interested in getting involved in that, I would just join the unified QR code channel in Slack and follow along on the conversation there. Especially because, yeah, it would actually be really interesting if we generated some BIP21 QR codes for you. And if you could see, with the kinds of phones people are using in your community, are they able to scan them? Does it work? So I think this would be a great project for you to get involved in. Thank you. I want to go ahead and move us on to our other topic here because we're getting close to the hour here. So this was really about getting more companies involved in the Bitcoin open source, and specifically the open source design space. And this was kind of inspired by a Slack post that Sahil made. So I just invited him to the stage. And would you like to talk a little bit about what your question was on Slack?
Yeah, sure. What's up, y'all? I'm a designer at Unchained, basically Bitcoin native financial services. I was kind of just thinking about this for a while because I've been following the awesome discussion, from a lot of open source contributors, and I was kind of wondering, like, how do we get more designers from Bitcoin companies today more engaged in on the Slack group in the community? I've been guilty of that myself, probably not contributing as much as I could or should. So it was just a discussion. I was chatting with Stephen about it one night and figured I'd post on the group, see what you guys think. I think it's almost in two separate topics. I feel like one topic is contributing research and maybe components, things like that, from the products you're working on back into open source. So let's say, I don't know, Cash App or Unchained does some research on, hey, how do we represent a Bitcoin address? Maybe we spend a ton of time and we do a bunch of research. Maybe it's worth contributing back somehow, the same way you open source like Google's material library. Maybe there's a Unchained open source component library. So I guess that's one conversation. And then the second conversation is like, how do we get more designers working at Bitcoin companies active on the Slack, just sharing tools, sharing tips, asking questions, giving feedback, requesting feedback. So I don't have an answer there. It might just be something like, hey, I've been busy all day and I just don't have time to jump on. So I don't know what the answer is, but I figured I'd bring it up.
Hi. Yeah, it's a great topic. I'll share a little bit of, I've done thinking on this and spoken with various designers at Block, some of whom I think are on this call now, about doing this. I'm quite optimistic that this will happen. One, you mentioned user research. That's certainly one area where user researchers at companies could contribute by publishing user research that otherwise would be confidential. I think that would be useful. The company does have to make a decision that it's a net benefit for the company when you're publishing stuff that previously was proprietary. But I think some companies certainly will arrive at that conclusion that it's a net benefit. And then there's different degrees of engagement there. It can simply just be published, and then the design community can just list it in the list of resources that already exists. But the next level engagement would be to actually dive deeper and see how that user research impacts the design guide and what the best practices are that are recommended to anyone using the design guide. And that next level engagement, it is more work, but it really would make the user research much more useful and impactful. So whether that is done by members of the design community or done by the company, the researchers or designers of the company itself, it could be either.
Right. So it almost sounds like you're saying, Steve, like the Bitcoin design guide is like a meta guide across potentially a lot of research across many companies, and we'll pull out that into the meta guide.
Yeah. Well, let me give. I think I can answer that question by also just a second way for designers at companies to engage is around specifically the design guide. So my advice and recommendation is I think the design guide is now mature enough that it either will directly add value to conversations and debates and discussions that are happening within a team, or be really close to be offering value. So one thing that I personally did while Cash App added Lightning to the product is that when there were debates and design discussions that came up where it wasn't clear what the right answer was, I started consulting the design guide. And I'm like, what does the design guide say? And a lot of times it touched on the topic, but it didn't go into enough depth to actually help, in this case, Cash App, but any wallet struggling with a decision. The design guide didn't go deep enough. So then I would just file a GitHub issue saying, hey, we need to improve the design guide. We need to go deeper here. Here's some of the challenges. It's not an easy decision. And already, folks in the design community have taken some of those and improved the design guide. That type of interaction, I would highly recommend any wallet developer or designer from a company to do, because it's really low effort to just look in the design guide for an answer. And it's also very low effort. Even the design guide doesn't offer you the answer. It's very low effort to file a GitHub issue saying, hey, I'd like it to answer this question for me, or at least provide analysis to help guide us, including vocabulary as well, what vocabulary to use. So that's a really, really low effort way that I think any designer at a company should be doing. Now, to go above and beyond, if if a company or designers at a company really see value in this and want to go do even more and contribute back to the community, then they can go ahead and actually make the improvement themselves to the design guide, offer the analysis they've done for their product that is generalizable, and go ahead and create the PR to improve the design guide. That would be even better. But even the really low effort aspect would be valuable, and I think it'll start to it'll encourage designers and companies to start being more active in Slack and other aspects of the community as well.
Steve, thank you for that. I think Pranav just had a hand up a couple of times, so I just wanted to make sure we had a chance to see if Pranav wanted to talk too. Thanks, Steve.
Yeah. Hey everyone. I'm new to the community right now. I just joined last week through the Summer of Bitcoin program, and well, I was thinking about what Sahil said, and well, to be honest, I think adding the research of such big apps can be really helpful right now because familiarizing the people with the whole Bitcoin and Lightning ecosystem is pretty essential right now because we are trying to gain the masses, acquisition, and for that, I guess only getting the research part out of it can really help with the design system as well. We can create good enough personas, and I think personas in itself can really help us build more or better products, or like a simple integration in the lowest level possible within the app can be pretty helpful right now. I need opinions on that.
Yeah, I agree with you, Pranav. That's a topic that comes up very frequently in conversation when I speak about the design community people. It's actually usually one of the first topics or one of the first questions people ask is like, do you do user research? What research do we have? What data do we have? So there's like a huge demand, I think, for good user research, and if anybody would like to work on that, that's a project ripe for the taking, whether it's coming from a volunteer or a paid open source contributor or somebody at a company like Sahil is asking about.
Yeah, I think my takeaway, Steve, that was really awesome. I think I have some pretty good next steps in terms of the two steps of, hey, refer to the design guide. If you don't see the thing there, at least communicate that maybe that's not in the guide, and then if the company is interested in going above and beyond, they can actually contribute back with research. And I think, for example, like Unchained really cares about open source. We have a Caravan tool for like a multi-sig coordinator. It's totally open source. So I think I can make that pitch pretty easily. So yeah, thanks again for the advice.
I just have a quick comment I want to make to kind of wrap up this topic, and then we want to do some kind of talk about some of the other projects going on in the community. One thing to think about with open source and Bitcoin is that we're kind of in a little bit uncharted territory here. So like the traditional kind of open source business model might be something like, say, Red Hat Linux, where you develop the code for the operating system and people can do whatever they want with it, and they just pay you to get training or technical support. And then another model might be like web-based open source, so like something like WordPress or Ghost or something like that, where you can do whatever you want to with the code. You just pay them if you want them to host it for you. But with Bitcoin, it's a little bit different because it's open source and people can interact with it in a variety of ways. And we're all fighting for self-custody and more self-custody and all that kind of stuff. And it's kind of this interesting situation where you could be a Bitcoin company and you could have the best UX in the entire world. But if another popular wallet isn't compatible or has bad UX, it affects you too. So it's like the UX of every single wallet or touch point in the ecosystem can in turn affect the experience of your users. So it's like the user experience of the ecosystem. It's not just about your company having a slick UI. It's actually about the whole ecosystem having good UX. So it's kind of like we're all in this together, and we need to make sure we're steering the ship in the right direction. So we've got a couple, just to wrap things up, we want to talk about some of the stuff that's coming up soon in the community. John O'Donohue, did you have something you want to mention?
Yeah, I'll shill a bag for Dulce, who's not here. We're doing totally free and open to anybody, really low pressure, just community mixer. We did one a couple of months ago and it was fun. Just a way for people who are new or maybe not as active in the community and want a chance to learn more about what it's all about, how they can get involved, channels they should join, projects they can hop into. It can be a little bit abstract. So we are going to loosely cover an agenda about the new version of the design guide, version 2, Lightning. But it's also just an open-ended chance for people who maybe didn't have a chance to ask questions or didn't want to, because this is a recorded call, to hop in. That's going to be on March 10th at noon Pacific Standard Time. And we'll post again in the Slack and make a GitHub issue about that. So everyone's welcome. Please show up. It'll be really casual. Hope to see you there.
Cool. Thanks, Patricia. Also, this last week, there was a call with Galoy, and there's a kind of an interesting design challenge revolving around the QR codes that are being used in El Zonte and Bitcoin Beach. So I think that's going to be kind of an ongoing project. So you can see the recording of that if that's maybe a project you want to get involved in. We've also started doing a weekly learning Bitcoin and design calls. So this is to try and help designers get up to speed on the technical aspects of Lightning and Bitcoin if you want to start designing for these. So the basic format is that people give us questions in advance, things that they'd be curious to know, and we kind of talk about them and dissect those questions and try to arrive at answers on the call. Of course, I got the another design guide jam coming up soon. We always have at least one of those once a month here, and I think that's probably all the events I can think of off the top of my head. But does anybody have any final questions or comments or anything before we wrap up this community call? Awesome. Sounds like not. So I think with that, we can just go ahead and wrap this up. So this has been good hanging with all of you today. And we will see you on Twitter and Slack, and see you again in about 3 weeks, I guess, for the next community call. All right. Talk to you later.
See you later. Thanks, Stephen.